Welcome to our KuppingerCole webinar, Engineering Successful IAM Projects to Support Digital Business. The speakers today are Andre Priebe, who is CTO at IC Consult Group, and me, Martin Kuppinger. I'm Principal Analyst at KuppingerCole Analyst. In the next 45, 50, 55 minutes, Andre and I will share some of our experience we have gathered over the past 15, 20, or even more years around making IAM projects a success. Before we start, I'd like to quickly highlight some upcoming events, and I also like to do some housekeeping, and then we directly dive into the context of today, or the content of today's webinar. We have two upcoming virtual events in early next year. One is about becoming a better privileged access manager, so it's a privileged access management theme. One is called Zeroing In on Zero Trust. Both, I believe, very important and very interesting themes. And then from May 10th to 13th, we will run our European Identity and Cloud Conference, the most relevant identity management gathering globally. We will run the EIC in Berlin or online, so you can choose which approach you want to take. Regarding housekeeping, we are doing the audio control, so you don't have to care about that. We will do a Q&A session by the end, but you also can enter your questions at any time. So the more questions we have, the better it is. We are recording the webinar. Slides are not that much this time because it's mainly guiding through the conversation I have. And we will do polls. So we will do two polls, in fact. And the first poll I'd like to do right now. So please take a few moments to answer and to pick your question. And the poll is one which is about your experiences with the reasons for IAM projects stalling or even failing. So is it lack of budget, insufficient stakeholder management, insufficient requirements gathering, too much of a technology focus, or a lack of proper expectation management? So which of these see you as the biggest reason? Please take a few seconds to enter your results. The more we have, the better it is. I give you another 15 to 20 seconds. Okay, I think we can close the poll. Thank you. We will pick this up later on, latest during the Q&A session. And with that, let's have a look at the agenda. This is a very, very lean agenda today because it only has 2 points. One is the Q&A I already mentioned. The other is, and Andre should be visible here as well in a second. The second is really, and so our first point, but this second I talk about is about lessons from practice, what to look at for engineering successful IAM projects. Welcome, Andre. Maybe you give a quick intro about yourself, and then we dive into our subject. Oh, here we go.
Yeah, thank you very much, Martin. Yeah, my name is Andre. I'm the CTO of the IC Consult Group and working for IC Consult now nearly 18 years. And as IC Consult, we are completely focused on digital identities, identity access management, API management, privileged access management, and so everything in that area. Yeah, the roots of the company are in Germany, but we are not just in the German-speaking markets anymore, but expanded to the UK, US, Spain, China, and recently started our subsidiary in Bulgaria.
Okay, so Andre, welcome. We know each other for quite a couple of years already. And as I said, we want to discuss a couple of things and a couple of, sort of lessons and themes we have looked at. And so the one I'd like to start with is requirements. So my experience is that one of the most important things, but frequently not done as good as it could be, is gathering requirements. So I've seen everything from the very long Excel lists, and sometimes really good ones, not only the ones we deliver, to whatever a list of audio, so fuzzy, unstructured criteria. My perspective is that this is really the starting point to take time for that exercise and not only look at today, so what you have today and what you feel is missing, but try to understand how will a market segment, how will a technology, how will demand potentially change over the next couple of years. What is your take on that?
Yeah, there are some points which are important. We have really two perspectives on that. One is being part of the process, gathering the requirements together with the customer to figuring out what are the requirements and then how can a solution look like. And the other perspective, the requirements has been gathered by the customer, by some maybe with external support, and then we are on the side of getting a view as a system integrator who gives a proposal to implement such a solution. Yeah, so two different perspectives. But anyhow, what are the points from my perspective? So first of all, gathering these requirements in a niche like identity access management is not very easy because the knowledge required for doing that is not everywhere available within the IT and within the business organization. So therefore, upfront, some education is often required to be able to gather these requirements, to talk with a customer about what should the solution look like and what should it fulfill at the end of the day. Yeah? That's one very, very important aspect.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point because, and I think two good points at the end. So the one is everyone needs these requirements. It's the end user organization to pick at the end the right solution and to implement it the right way, to prioritize, etc. I think the second point is, yes, you as a system integrator, for instance, it helps you a lot because you better understand what is the prioritized feature set, etc. And it also helps the vendor to come up with, okay, they will always try to sell, but at the end, they can come up with a better understanding of is this really a fit and what will be complex in the project, etc. The point I like with you is also, I can just convince it that is this knowledge. When I look at some of the things we are doing, then part of that is really educating the customers, educating them. What is the terminology? What are the segments in the market? What are you really looking for? And very frequently, it is a multi-step approach, educating them, identifying out of the bigger areas within identity management, so access management versus user lifecycle provisioning versus privileged access management, others. What are the big blocks first? Prioritize these and then go into the detailed requirements for each and every project and saying, okay, what is what you specifically need here? And I think the other point is not only creating a list of priorities, but also of requirements, but also prioritizing that list. Because and having some but few must criteria. So I've seen projects where this list consisted of more than 30, 40 must criteria, which inevitably means no vendor fulfills the requirements, because if you have too many must criteria, then there definitely will be at least one criteria per vendor where the vendor fails. And so my hint is always stay around 10 at maximum for must criteria. You might have high priorities for others. You should also have low priorities, but do this exercise.
Yeah, I completely agree, because when implementing this project, typically this 60 must criteria at the end of the day are not 60 must criteria, but maybe 20, because a couple of requirements which are, well, must because of misunderstanding, or because that that the team was not aware about alternative approaches, how to solve it, maybe better, maybe in a modern way, these kind of things. And therefore, I really like the point to prioritize on the requirements which are really important, and not trying to make a list which is really no vendor, no product able to deliver. But there's one other point which is, well, typically we learn more about the things which went wrong than what we did right by accident, right? What you can really do wrong when it's about requirements engineering is following an approach. We are going to focus just on an MVP, just on the first iteration. I'm not interested in anything else, because if you're starting that way, you will realize, okay, I have just this very few requirements, and implementing these kind of things from the scratch without going in an evaluation of software is much more efficient, faster. Yeah, I can really do that. Anyhow, after 2, 3, 4 iterations, it looks completely different. Yeah, then you are stuck with a solution you cannot maintain. And
but it's a little bit a common misunderstanding of agile methodologies in some way, because agile is not just the now part, it's also the soon part and the later part. And agile, that never happens without any restrictions. So agile development happens in a defined environment, in a sort of a defined framework. And I think, yes, it's important. We'll touch this later on. Maybe we go also to the next point here. So we understand requirements gathering, prioritization. It's a super important thing, because this is really what ensures that you, at the end, pick something and implement it in a way, in an order that meets your requirements. The second theme I'd like to bring up is stakeholders. And you probably can also tell a ton of stories around situations where stakeholder and expectation management sort of caused some of the trouble. And there's also this over-promising, the big win thing. So maybe you can tell a little bit from your experience here.
Yes, sure. Expectation management is something which is really important, because what is typically happening at the process, the requirements are gathered, and then vendors are presenting their solutions, their approaches. There is actually kind of overselling and overpromising, and everything is simple to implement. There are no problems which cannot be solved very easily by that extremely innovative product. This kind of thing, and also looking into the requirements. Of course, the product supports passwordless MFA, and it supports Windows login and so on. Realizing that this product is not supporting passwordless MFA for the Windows login is something which then happens inside the project after a solution selected, and so on. And these are typically the things which then result in a situation where the expectations are not met, and that's something what we all, of course, want to prevent.
Yeah, and I think at the end it all starts. So my first point is always stakeholders. So who is involved? The problem is identity management, or the challenges. It always is a cross-system project. It is not just something you do in your small domain, but it affects. It means you talk with HR, you talk with a ton of application owners, you talk with the security people, with the infrastructure people, and so on. It is not a simple thing. And the other thing is, I think, then giving or managing the expectations in an appropriate manner. And this over-promising, I think this is, and you bring it up, yes, vendors, I think that's by nature, and that's also okay. They are sort of oversimplifying some of the things sometimes. And I think it's important that we that everyone in the project doesn't overpromise. And I'm a big believer in this idea of having not only quick wins defined. I think everyone has learned this over the years. Define what your quick wins are, but also thinking about what are the big wins, what will be what I deliver at the end or after a larger phase of my project as the bigger achievement.
Yeah, and maybe to add something, you mentioned the importance of the stakeholder management, and cannot agree more. Because what is really required during an IAM project, and it's nearly the case in all projects, larger projects I'm aware of, is the support of the upper management. Because Martin, you mentioned, yeah, it's something which is affecting the whole organization, and you need the obligations from a specific business unit, maybe an application or IT network team, maybe from HR, whatever. But if you do not have didn't do the stakeholder management in a good way, you will likely not get the support if it is required, and you have delays in the project, not able to fulfill the timelines. Again, expectations not met, and therefore it's really worth spending time on that, understanding who are my stakeholders, talking to them, what are their expectations, in order to make the project successful.
Yeah, and this list of stakeholders always gets longer than the people think at the beginning of the project. So talking about expectations, I think that is very close to the buy-in of everyone. So it's not only saying this is what we will do, but it's also getting them on board. So either by saying, okay, this is really what we want you to deliver, best case, or at least, okay, I have understood the need for that, and I will not sort of become an obstacle on that way. Because so sometimes it is that they say, okay, do what you want, don't bother me with that. But I think this understanding is important, because what I learned over the years is, if you do an identity management project, and you as a system integrator, you're way longer in these projects than we as analysts are, it is about, there will be a storm. There will be the need to weather the storm at a certain time. And only if the people have understood what you're doing, and also if the entire project team knows why they have chosen the tool, why they picked the system integrator, why they followed that approach, only then they will be able to stand sort of well and good and stable on their boat during the storm.
Yeah, exactly. At the beginning, we do not know from whom in the organization we will need support, but we are sure we will need that from a couple of people, of departments. And well, if for any reason this is not happening as expected, then we need our champion in the organization, yeah, to make sure that we get that support which is required. Otherwise, there are a couple of persons which can make such a project fail. Yeah, that's easy, and that's what all want to prevent.
Yeah, and it costs so much power and time to deal with these obstacles, and with the typically very few persons which take a different route. And I think that is something you ideally solve at the beginning and not at the end or during the project. Which also means we need to talk about organization. At the end, we need, my strong belief, we need to have identity management being a department of its own. So it's not part of infrastructure. It's not just part of security. It's identity and access management. It's too important from my perspective for a digital business. And it shouldn't be many identity management departments, not to speak about what is still sometimes the identity management here and access management here. No, go for one identity management organization. That's my perspective. What is your experience?
Yeah, I see it the same way. So because it's of course, very closely related to IT security and playing a very, very important role, maybe today even more than in the past. But on the other hand, it's also about business enablement. It is about providing digital services to enable collaboration, alliances between enterprises. This is all going because of the digital identities and the capabilities provided by these solutions. And a dedicated team makes absolutely sense. Also, it is, from my perspective, very important to have a very strong product owner, because there will be a lot of demand from the whole organization, of course, focusing on their very, very specific problems, and identity access management cannot solve all of them, but have to make sure that it's providing value to the whole organization and not just to this very specific single requirements of a very specific single use case. So it's a trade-off, and therefore a strong product owner is also very important to make the solution or IAM program successful.
How would you structure an IAM organization? So have you any sort of favorite structures as the sort of the bigger areas within identity management? So do you do it more per technology area, or more like operations and the sort of the IAM core functions like managing roles, and then more the business oriented functions? So what is your preference?
Yeah, so first of all, I would completely agree that should the organization should have one head, which is covering the whole aspect. Yeah, so there are different approaches which can be successful. So, for example, going from a functional perspective, makes somehow sense because it's the technologies which is used, is the protocols which are relevant are different. Yeah, so from a know-how perspective, of course, it makes sense to have IGA, to have PAM, to have MFA, Access Management Federation, these kind of things. On the other hand, the counterparts, the application owners on the other side are then talking to different people in different teams maybe, and that is a drawback of that approach from my perspective. Therefore I like having an approach in which we are more focusing on the types of identities, having the customers, consumer identities on the one side, and the B2B workforce, employee, contractors on the other side, something like that, because then it's easier for the digital touchpoints, application owners, the mobile apps to integrate and connect to the IAM world.
Yeah, I also like sort of having layers, because especially when we look at the operations part, that part is more and more run and managed services like you do as part of your IC Consult group. So that is something where you have sometimes really a different model where parts are not within your organizations, while the inner parts, so managed into roles, etc., commonly is something more internal, and also skill requirements at the different layers are vastly different, and there needs also to be somewhere a governance department clearly in that. But all of that will need, without any doubt, that will need skills, and so I think everyone in identity management, everyone in cybersecurity is currently confronted with this skills gap. There are just not enough experienced, educated people out there, which are the identity management experts. You might need them. So my perspective on that is that it is very important anyway to not only have the externals. I think you will always need him. You rarely can run something, a larger identity management project just with your own team. But I also believe in transferring knowledge. So my perspective is always a project is good when the customer is able to do it sort of himself afterwards run it himself, then I did a proper job.
Yeah, so that's our experience as well. So first of all, there might be the idea if so as a system integrator, if the customer has no knowledge about it, you cannot be replaced. But it's exactly the opposite thing. For the following reason, someone who has no clue about what you are doing, for them it is simple. IAM can be done by company A, can be done by company B. I can exchange them easily. As soon as someone is getting a deep understanding about what is happening there, as soon as he understands the complexity, it's not so likely that for the contractor to be replaced. That's one thing. The other thing is an identity access management solution or an identity access management program in an enterprise can only be successful if the owner within that organization is able to sell the solution to into his own company. Without an understanding, this is also not possible. Therefore, we as IC Consult believe that information hiding would be completely damaging the relationship, being bad for the company, and being bad for the IC Consult is contractors as well. So being open, educating the customer to understand really, to understand the challenges, to understand the solution. That's something what really is best for all players in that game.
Yeah, and I really see also the same point. Customers are not looking for, but they need to understand what they are doing, and you will be more successful in your project if you have a good counterpart, because you will move way faster in that case. And so I think it leads to a better relationship, and better relationships last longer. It's relatively simple. So one of the other favorite themes I have, and requirements gathering or not properly done requirements gathering is one of the things I see as one of the biggest challenges. The second one I really see is sort of, I call it just technology overkill. It is this too technology focused approach, starting with a tool, not having done the groundwork before. So like you want to build a house, and you end up with like the Tower of Pisa, because it's the ground wasn't prepared well, and it was the wrong thing, and the plan didn't work, and stuff like that. But even worse, I sometimes see then companies, and they have a list of vendors they want to look at, and these are not only apples and oranges, but these are apples, and they're tomato and cucumber and whatever else. It's a totally nonsense mix of vendors, because that starts with requirements gathering, with understanding everything. But I've seen it far too frequent.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you see that?
Yeah. So we have then sometimes the situation that if you're entering a project in a later stage, so the products are decided, and the high-level architecture somehow designed, ending up in the situation that it unfortunately doesn't fulfill the requirements which are now there, popped up during the project, because there are missing pieces. Then in the situation that we have to introduce additional tools, because the selected solution can just not solve it. Some others would have solved everything, but anyhow wasn't selected. So which then has an impact on the timeline, and of course on the budget, and these kind of things. And that's unfortunately happening more often than you would all like to see that. So getting the very good understanding upfront is very, very critical. Just one point. It doesn't matter how good the requirements engineering is, it will not be complete. Yeah, so there will be a couple of requirements which will come in a later stage. Yeah, maybe after the product is finished. Yeah, and so not focusing just on the existing requirements, but also having in mind to build a very, very flexible solution. That's something which is really, really important, because the lifetime of an identity access management solution is often much larger than expected before. The solution
that leads us later on also that leads us later on also to a little bit touching modern architecture and stuff like that. I think we can do a lot if we implement it right. But yes, the requirement gatherings never will be complete. And our experience is you do the RFI, and then when you prepare for the POC, you already have some additional requirements already. You can then check there, and then you need the flexibility. But before that, I strongly believe in saying, okay, I have some big picture of identity management. I know where I want to move. And I also recommend strongly invest time in defining processes. And I believe it helps you, for instance, massively if a customer says, these are all the processes, this is how I see them. Because as an integrator, I believe the life is way simpler if processes are well defined than when they say, oh, do the onboarding of users. And then say, oh, but I had another idea in mind. So policies, all these things are required to be successful.
Completely agree. And if you spend time not before selecting the solution, then you have to spend the time later in the implementation phase anyway. Yeah, so it's there's no way to go without that.
I'm 100% convinced that time for planning, we don't talk about years here. We don't talk about really endless times. This can be done relatively fast and efficient, but that time always pays off during the implementation and the later on operations of a product. So it is really a misconception. Oh, we need it so urgent, we can't plan properly. If you do that, then you're just increasing the project risk.
Yeah, and likely the time for implementation anyway.
And the time and the cost. So yeah, change management. Andre, what's your take on that?
Yeah, that's often completely underestimated. Yeah. So again, we learn from what did not go very well, and so one approach which I experienced a few times, and which was sometimes just a disaster, is okay, we have our identity access management team. They have the legacy solution, focusing on that, and so we need an integrator who's building up the new IAM solution for us, and then the existing team can turn down the old one and take over the new one. Yeah? A big change for people who were working with a solution for 10 years or 20 years even, and now should be in charge for something which is not their child. It's something arbitrary. They don't know about it. They don't like it, but they are just overruled by their management. On the long run of such a project, there will be so much resistance, lack of access to that knowledge of the people which do have the knowledge of the organization, that it will become very hard to make such a project a success. And so having these kind of things in mind, how to bring a solution to the organization, what people will be affected, how can we make sure that they are with us, that is also their child, what is now born. That's something which is very, very important to make a project a success.
And it means, again, having the stakeholders, having the people on board early, listen to them, ask with them, talk with them, explain to them. So I've seen, for instance, in privileged access management projects, the situation, you say, we need to do that. And then the Unix administrator or Linux administrator say, oh, but then we can't work efficiently anymore. And this is also being prepared and saying, okay, this is maybe how it changes, but this might be make it better. What do you need? Also asking them, gathering their concerns, their requirements, and it will make projects way more successful, way better, I believe, than that.
Let them try two different alternatives to propose them. Yeah, we can do it this way or that way, and then they can participate, delivering their input, which is affecting their work in a few weeks or months, and then you have friends in the organization which likes the solution. Otherwise, they will find the smaller, larger issues and complaining.
Yeah, and sometimes it's also waiting a little, so planting the idea and wait a few weeks and until they come back and say, hey, I had this great idea. And then don't say, oh, that was my idea, but just say, hey, great idea. Yeah. Okay. Focus. Also one of these things I've seen quite a lot of time. And HR is my example here, but there are other areas. So HR data comes in, it's in horrible quality, and no one feels responsible for that. And at the end, the identity management project builds complex solutions to integrate the data to improve the quality. It does a lot of work, which is not identity management. So how do you deal with these challenges?
Yeah. Well, we are very aware of these kind of things. For example, when then there's a use case defined how to fix the master data in the Active Directory of the employees, because that's a process how they did it all the time, not in the HR system, but in the AD. And then that's the point when we realize, oh, okay, there is an issue with the data quality and and not just we mentioned is the HR, but of course it's the same. It's the same on the CRM side, for example, if it's about the custom identities. So remembering one project where we detected a large number of doublets in the repository, because some of the dealers out there were not entering the mail address and phone numbers of the real customers, but their own, to prevent that someone else is going to contact them. These kind of things. And if you will, if this data is a source for digital identity, this is of course a horror. Okay, how to deal with it? Unfortunately, there's no easy way, but to try really to fix the root cause of it, not making a workaround, but the root cause. Unfortunately, not all organizations do have the access to come to that point. Therefore, I think that what we mentioned before, talking about the stakeholders, about talking about a champion on a very high level, maybe in the board of the organization who's supporting your project, this is the point in time you have to call him and say, well, we need now your help to make the project successful.
Yeah, we need to talk, and we need to understand what is the process, what is the interface, what are your responsibilities, what are our responsibilities, and let's find a solution for the things which are somewhere in the gray area in between. I believe that's exactly the point. At the end, it's about change management, it's about stakeholder management, about expectation management, about responsibilities, and the one thing you never should do, my rule number one, when you come into a customer and that customer says, oh, we have this global HR program running, so we don't need to care about this because until we really start with identity management, they will be done. Don't believe it. I've never seen that global HR program being ready when the IAM program needed it. Never.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's get modern. And I think you brought up a very important point. That is, even with the best requirements gathering. And by the way, to the attendees, if you have questions, enter the questions into the questions tool of GoToWebinar so that we can pick them in the Q&A session. But back to your point, you brought up this point. You will never have a perfect requirements gathering, not for these whatever 7 or 10 or 15 years, the IAM solution will be in place. You might be good, you might be horribly bad, but even if you're good, there will be things that change over time, new requirements that come in. And also there's this risk of, oh, I have this special requirement, can we customize it? And at a certain point, it's hard to impossible to maintain it. So why do modern architectures help us here, Andre? You're the CTO, it's your theme number one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so we have, if you have in mind, we are talking about a lifetime of at least 10 years, yeah, maybe 20 years, who knows. And of course, if you start today with an old, maybe established architectural approach, which is a little bit outdated already, how will it look like in 5 years, in 10 years? That's really the point that we should really make sure that when we start, that this is really state of the art. Because there will be a couple of requirements we cannot even imagine today, but they will be there in 5 years. It's crystal clear. So we have to have the solution which we can easily maintain, upgrade, which we can enhance without having collecting too much technical depth. So of course we are talking about things like microservices, where okay, it's much better to maintain than a monolithic approach. Talking about things like infrastructure as code, configuration as code. So these patterns where they can apply them to have a solution which is easy to maintain, and also each very specific feature we have to implement, we should really think about, is this something what we are able to maintain for the next decade? Yeah? Because if you have too much maintenance efforts, it's not easy anymore to be flexible to fulfill the new important requirements the business has.
Yeah, I think the good thing is that more and more, if not most tools today are shifting into modern architectures, modern deployment models. So you can do all coding in segregated microservices using the APIs and sort of segregating it from the core product, which was a big challenge in older products. But yes, you never will be perfect, but you need to well understand, what does it mean? What does a customization mean? What is the depth you are gathering here? Also, the one thing I see is that sometimes it might be or phrase it differently. Customers sometimes say, "Oh, this product I have here, it doesn't work anymore. I can't upgrade to the next big release, or because I would have to change so many things, and I have totally lost control about what I had done in customizations over the past 10 years." Sometimes they just say, and then it's I think I understand it, or they blame the vendor and say, "Oh, this is because of the product." And after these discussions, sometimes quite lengthy discussions, we had a couple of situations where we said to the customer, at the end, the best thing you can do is go to the next big release of the vendor you already had, but to sort of do a restart, reuse the parts you can, reuse your knowledge, your experience, maybe all the connectors, because they might be pretty much the same, and then build on maybe the standard processes that are delivered. That might be the fastest way forward sometimes.
Yeah, I completely agree. And something else we should have in mind, as you brought up the point, that there will be sometimes replacement of components, maybe just with a new version of the same product, maybe with another product. Another very important point is we should, wherever it is possible, using standard protocols to integrate with the applications out there. Where it is not possible, have an abstraction layer in between to be flexible. Because one thing which is really tough is if you have a proprietary interface which is used by maybe hundreds of applications within the enterprise, and then you have to change to something else. This is a pain and will take a lot of effort and time.
But I have a good tip on how to, under guarantee, get in trouble. That is, program against the data model of the product. Do you have 100% guarantee that you will get in trouble sooner or later? So last, at least, our last point, and then we do a little bit of Q&A. So enter your questions now. I believe you also need to be pragmatic. Pragmatic in the sense of having a program, but small projects, not over-engineering, but understanding the bigger picture. And solving problems in small steps. And I think this goes back to the MVP thing you brought up. Yes, you can do MVPs if you know where this should end up, and if you know that from what you did first, you have a realistic chance to end up where you want to end up. My take on that.
Exactly. The MVP is the first step to the big picture. I completely agree. Completely agree. Not putting too much risk, delivering fast value with your solution, and also be able to adapt it a little bit left, right, the very early stage. This is very, very valuable. Doing that MVP without having that big picture is the opposite thing. You're likely running in the wrong direction and you are not aware of that.
Yeah. Okay, I think we spent quite a lot of time right now talking about some of our experiences. I want to bring up a second poll, and hopefully we get some questions from the audience. So as I said, having more questions makes a Q&A way more lively. But first, let's do the second poll, and then we will look at the poll results and take questions if there are any. So the question to the audience, do you already have a comprehensive blueprinted architecture across all of IAM in place? So did you do this groundwork thing already? Simple answers, yes or no, if the poll displays. So the poll should show up in a second. Here we go. Okay, I give you another 10 seconds. The more answers, the better it is. Okay, then I'll close the poll. So thank you for participating in that poll. And so, as I said, we had quite a lot of discussion here. And right now, let's move to the Q&A part. So I don't have questions from the audience yet, or these are comments. So maybe we get some. So then maybe let's first look at the first poll, and let's present the results of that poll, which should be visible here. And oops, I've lost it. Here we go. And it's interesting because specifically the first answer is an interesting one. Of the audience, no one said our problem is the lack of budget. That is something I wouldn't have expected, honestly. While and there's little lack of proper expectation management, but then more or less or very close to each other, there's too technology focused, insufficient stakeholder management, insufficient requirements gathering. I think, Andre, when we look at these, this quite well verifies a lot of the points we raised, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I think we highlighted the importance of gathering the requirements. We're talking a lot about that piece because we all are aware of how important that is, not just we, but also the whole audience. But I'm really, but it's really exciting to see that it's not the lack of budget. And if I'm going through our projects in my mind, typically it's not the challenge that you would have solved it better if there would be just more money, but it's really about having the clear picture what should be achieved at the end of the day, and that's the point when you started and yeah, so I can understand. That this is the way how also the audience is seeing these challenges.
We have, by the way, a really great question from the audience. And that is one I think every one of us has experienced. And that is, how do you deal, or how do you work with stakeholders that have tried to solve IAM challenges and projects, but have failed over and over and don't want to try again? So you're saying this, and the board member says, "Oh, we tried it 3 times," or some owner said, "Oh, we tried to do that part of identity management, role management projects, for instance," a very common example. "I don't want to do it anymore." So what is your guidance on how to overcome these concerns at the end? Because it are concerns, and usually they are driven by, we spent a lot of money, we fear to risk our careers and other factors. So what do you do here?
Yeah, I think in these cases, it's of course important understanding why did they fail and what can be done better, and how is it clear that this time it will be successful. Yeah. Also, I think we covered that aspect of small steps, iterations. Yeah. So maybe no one is willing to give upfront the budget for the whole project, but maybe it is possible to get budget for the first steps and showing the results, show that this way will lead to success this time. Yeah. But yeah. I think this will anyhow not an easy task.
It is not easy. I think the points you raise are correct. So be pragmatic, make small steps, quick wins, big wins, demonstrators. And the other part, from my perspective, is trust building. So at the end, they will need to trust you as the advisor, that your experience, and when I look at how many projects IC Consult has done, or so, then or years of experience people like you or as me have, I think that is the trust part, and also the openness at the end in the communication, saying these are the risks. This is where you feel rethink things, and I think this rethinking is also very important. Not only do the standard stuff always, but also say, okay, then step back and think about how can we do it differently. Why did you fail? And so analyzing this all together, I think makes it work. But it's not an easy job to do. That's definitely for sure. So maybe let's look at the results of the second poll, which was about having a blueprint in place or not. So we see them right now, and it's a pretty much tied situation. And it's interesting. I raised the same question a while ago in another webinar, and it was more or less exact the same response. So some have, some don't have. I just can say, and I think we can stop displaying them. I just can say it is important to spend the time for planning. If you build a house, you have an architect. If you do identity management, you need the architects and so on, the designers as well. Otherwise, you will fail. So maybe, Andre, before we stop for today, is there one recommendation you would want to give the audience before we end?
Yeah, one recommendation. Typically, our customers, enterprises which start IAM projects, spend a lot of time on finding the right vendor. So that's very, very important. But the right system integrator is also important. So not underestimating the impact that the people who are supporting that project have, because if someone is working with the technology the first time, it's likely to fail. We are talking about complex software here, complex tools, about complex processes within these enterprises, and without experience in that area, it's very hard to be successful in the first try.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. And that is, for instance, when we guide organizations through the choice of tools, we always say, bring in the system integrator of choice early, because you need the right tool, you need the right system integrator, and you need the right fit between the two of them. We even had projects where they said, okay, I like this at the end. I like this tool, but I want to do it with the other system integrator who came in with another vendor first. Interestingly, that system integrator was you at the end of the day that won that project. But it is something which is very important, because also the system integrators thing also ask, who are the people we need to build work with for the next years, maybe? Because if you can't work well with them, it's challenging. So we got one more question here, and I think that is one we should pick with a short answer. It is honestly a quite complex question. So what is the best argument convincing the top management about investing in a new modern identity management? Is it compliance? Is it minimizing risk? My take is, for most organizations today, it is enabling the digital business, because everything is about identities. It's not just the workforce, it's the customers, consumers, the partners, devices, things, services, etc. So, and giving seamless access for everyone, seamless yet secure access for everyone and everything to every service is challenging, and you need a good enough technology to do so. That is what works for most organizations. Sometimes, and we have seen it in banks for the past 15 years, sometimes regulators are a great driver and auditors. If they don't work, then look at how can you enable the business to perform better. My take, your take?
Yeah, I can completely agree. It's really the enablement, which is typically the driver for the top management. So, for example, maybe it is worth to have a look to the other IT initiatives. Yeah, going into the cloud without a very powerful identity access management in place, it's very hard to achieve. Collaborations by providing digital services with other enterprises, or to provide digital services to integrate with digital assistants out there. Without identity access management, you will spend a lot of efforts in making just one use case somehow work. Yeah. With an identity access management in place, it's an accelerator for a lot of these initiatives, and I think that's a message which should convince the top level management.
Okay, perfect. So thank you to the audience. Thank you very much to you, Andre. So we're at the point of saying thank you for this, I believe, very interesting, insightful conversation. I hope you also perceived this that way. So thank you, and hope to have you soon back at one of our KuppingerCole events. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Martin. Was again a pleasure discussing together with you, getting your opinions, and yeah, and thank you very much to the audience for participating and listening to us.
Bye. Okay, bye.
Goodbye.